our first session of Idaho Home Garden Tips. We've got a whole growing season ahead of us and exciting things coming up. Just to remind everybody that we will be having our classes twice a month, the second and fourth Tuesday of each month through the month of October. So this is our first one, and we're excited to have with us Reed Findlay, our extension educator down in Bingham and Bannock County. Reed, you need to swap your display.
I think I just did. Is it working now?
And you swapped it from what it should be to what it shouldn't be. So
I'll swap it back.
There you go. How's
that?
Okay. Anyway, so we're excited to have Reed here with us, and we've also got Jared. So what the standard format of this is the first 30 minutes or so, we have a presentation of some gardening topic that is relevant to whatever time of year it happens to be. And then the last 30 minutes, those of us who are extension educators and others who are experienced gardeners will answer questions to help, if you've got some questions coming up, some things happening as we get into the growing season, especially get into the things that are happening in your yard or in your garden, and you have questions about it, we'll see what we can do. Reed likes to call it Stump the Chumps. And so that's
it's easy to do, right, Ron?
Yeah. So that's, we got Jared online here now. So it'll probably be a lot harder to stump the chumps now that we got
Trifecta.
So, and also you'll notice that on the introductory slide, there was that QR code that had demographic survey on there. Sometime throughout the summer, if you would please click on that and fill that out, just a little demographic information so that we can report to the federal government that we're doing our job the way we should be doing it, or let them know at least the types of the people, not names, just a little bit of demographic information about the people. You don't have to, or if you do and you say, well, I don't want to answer that question, whatever, there's that option on there as well. And Lena will also, if you don't happen to catch that on the introductory slide, she will also have that, put that into the chat so that you can click on that and fill out that survey for us. It'll go automatically, and we'll just, there's nothing to identify you on it. So just once throughout the year, if you do it now, we'll continue to ask people to do it. But if you've done it, you do it this week, you'll never have to worry about it again for the rest of this year. Now, next year, again, we'll have to start all over again. But that just kind of helps us keep track of numbers and how well we're reaching out to people. So, Reed, go ahead and take over.
Thanks, Ron. Well, Ron's background there is appropriate because tonight we're going to be talking about potato production in the home garden. There's a few different, I think Lena is going to put on some little fact sheets and current information series information on potatoes for gardeners. I think a couple of them that I would focus on for people would be this potato production in the home garden, and also options for storing potatoes at home. Both of those can be found by just Googling University of Idaho Extension publications and going to the gardening section. And then there's also one fun little publication for youth, for kids, A Potatoes Journey. So if you ever want to have your kids know what's going on in Idaho with the potatoes, that publication is made for them. Potato production is really important in Idaho, not just for gardens, but it's a big economic driver in our state. The value is literally millions of dollars. And we really do have large yields. For the potatoes is 430 cubic weight. That's 100 pounds. Cubic weight is 100 pounds. So that's 430 sacks that are 100 pounds a piece. So those are a couple of big crops in Idaho, and I'm involved in kind of helping the farmers grow those and consulting with the farmers. Potatoes come from Peru and Bolivia. I've been down to Peru, and when you go to Peru and live there, there's all kinds of different potatoes. 40 years ago when I was there, all kinds of different potatoes. And now we're starting to notice those potatoes, and in fact, the University of Idaho is starting to breed some of those purple potatoes, the fingerlings, and boy, we produced some really fun ones at Aberdeen Station this year, they let me taste test a few of them. When you take them from the station, they make you eat them. You can't grow them in your garden because they're protected genetically, and also to isolate any diseases that might be coming from the Andes. They make you eat them, but they are very, very tasty. Some of them are red, some of them are large, and that's where they come back. And we found that they may go back 10,000 years, but we know for sure there's archaeological evidence 2,500 BC. But that doesn't mean that humans were really much involved necessarily in when they first started diverging from native species. I always thought that humans did most of the converting the native species into potatoes, but they diverged 8 million years ago, long before humans were really making crops and stuff and genetically modifying things. Now, in 1537, Juan Castellanos brought them back from Peru. He found that they were freeze-drying them in the high Andes Plain. And when you're up there on the Altiplano, the high Andes Plain, that's how you eat the potatoes. And they don't taste that good. I'll just tell you, these freeze-dried potatoes that are frozen in their little stone huts, they're not like a russet potato at a good restaurant or something. But they arrived in Europe, in Spain in 1570, and then in Britain by 1588. And then later on, people did not want to eat those for years and years because we had nightshade in Europe, and this thing is related to nightshade, and nightshade is fairly toxic, right? So it only was eaten by the poor, the Irish poor, and they just had one variety, and they grew one same variety, and it got hit by late blight and caused the 1845 famine, okay, which brought a lot of settlers to the United States. So potatoes have a lot to do with the Irish in America. Don't know if you can see that great, but potatoes prefer to grow at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, that's great. Idaho, we're there quite a bit of the time. But if you get, growth is slowed when you get below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and also at high temperatures, they don't grow very much above 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So those really hot temperatures, when we get around 90 degrees, the spud, the growing part up top, is not growing very much. And so they got that little window, and they like cooler environments. And that's one of the reasons we grow them in Idaho, because we got nice cool environments, low amounts of precipitation, which helps us reduce the diseases, and also sandy soils where you can get the moisture to flow out and not have a lot of root diseases. Okay, they like long days. They do definitely like adequate moisture. They don't need a lot of moisture in the spring and the fall, just enough to dig them out of the ground. But they do need a lot of moisture right during potato bulking, right after row closure. Okay, and they like our soils. Like I said, insect control measures are often needed, especially for producers that are growing a whole acres of them, And the optimum pH would be 5.5. So they would rather have a little bit more acidic soils than we have around here. Okay. Now, potatoes grow kind of different. This is the blue line, that dark blue line that starts on the left. That would be the grams per plant of the seed. So you start out less than 20 grams per plant. And these are 5, 10, 15, and up to 95 days after planting. And you can see that top starts growing about the 20th day, and then it really, from the 30th day to about the 60th day, the top really expands quite a bit, and then shuts off, stops growing, the top. That's when you get to row closure. And then the green is the tuber, the spuds that you're going to harvest, and they really don't get going for a couple of months. But boy, that last month or so, the potato tubers really expand their growth, and that's called bulking. And that's when they need to have the right kind of nutrition, the right kind of heat, the right kind of everything to grow. And if allowed to, they'll, the whole plant, all of it will be 180 grams per plant, with more than half of that being spuds. Okay, so that's their growth pattern. There's a lot of great garden varieties. Some of the newer ones that we've been involved with the University of Idaho, Ida Rose, are great, and I think that they're good. There's also some great red ones like Red Norland. But also, if you want to try Ranger Russet, Ranger Russet Norcota, those are your good russet potatoes that are higher yields and more nutritionally valuable. And then also, my favorite is Yukon Gold. I love those things. I especially love making those into French fries. But that's the great thing about spuds. They're very nutritious, and they don't have a lot of calories if you don't add a lot of butter and sour cream and other things to them, you know. But they do need to be cooked. Their nutrition is very poor if they're not cooked. So yeah, cook them. And make sure horses don't eat any spuds out of your garden in the fall, because that can really damage horses. So they are toxic to horses. So planting the site, it needs at least 6 hours of direct sun, so it's not going to be in a place where you've got shade. Make sure the soils are well drained, and that's so that you reduce the root rots and other things, and Phytophthora and Rhizoctonia that can get into the roots. Do not buy tubers from the store that were made to eat and packaged to eat and then grow them. They'll grow, but they could be very high in viruses. And we need to be very, very careful about using seed. Even the farmers, they only use seed that comes from reputable sources that were grown up there in Teutonia or in Grace, Idaho, and then they grow those spuds really, really fast so they outgrow the virus, and then the seed source that they have can only be used for a few years before the virus builds up in the tuber, because it's not really grown by a seed. Seeds would be able to eliminate a lot of the viruses. So plants that are produced are come from seed, like corn and wheat and barley, they kind of have a barrier to viruses. But since the tuber is a part of the stem and a part of the whole plant, and you're just growing clones of the plant, the original plant, with the tuber, the viruses could keep coming. So now, when you buy the seed pieces from different places, sources around greenhouses, you can cut the tubers into small pieces. I recommend 2 eyes. A lot of things I've read say 1 eye, but I go for 2. Maybe that's a little bit maybe that's being very conservative. You want to plant them about 4 inches deep and about 2 feet apart, and then the rows need to be about 3 feet apart, 2 to 3 feet apart, somewhere in that range. And that's so that the plant has enough space to where the plant can fully expand and doesn't get crowded out by its neighbors. And that's very important. One of the things that competes with potatoes would be other potatoes. And the weeds that are the worst in potatoes are those solanaceous type weeds, like cutleaf nightshade, curly nightshade, and all those other ones. Okay? Now, potatoes don't do well with large amounts of matter or as organic matter as fertilizer, especially manure. They really prefer inorganic sources of nutrients, and that's because of the way that we've bred potatoes since the time that we got them from Peru and Bolivia. So manure, if you add it at the wrong time and too many years in a row, it can decrease the quality of the tuber. And the specific gravity is what will be impacted. It will decrease that, and it also can increase the occurrence of potato scab. Potato scab is that when you harvest the spud and you wash them off and it still looks like it's got little pieces of dirt on it. Those aren't dirt. That's kind of a fungus that stays on the potato. Now, that doesn't hurt the potato, nor does it make it so you can't eat it, but it is a disease that is exacerbated by additions of manure. So, we did some studies here at the University of Idaho a few years ago, and I got permission from Amber Moore to present this data at potato school this year. Anyhow, if you add these different rates, so the blue line is annual applications of manure, the reddish line is applications every 2 years, and then the dark black line is inorganic fertilizer. And as you look, it's great for organic matter. It's great to have annual applications. That's that blue line in the upper left corner. Okay. It's also pretty good for phosphorus. It increases the phosphorus. That's the upper right. Potassium is increased. That's the lower left. But then you start getting into salinity effects, and the annual applications of manure increases the soil salinity. And in this slide, it's decisiemens per meter, which is the electrical conductivity. And as the electrical conductivity goes from 0 to 3 to 4, that means there's more electrical conductivity, which means the soil solution is more salty. And that increased soil salinity can affect the maturity of the spud, when it matures, and also the specific gravity and some other quality factors. So you need to be careful. Okay, the next slide here. This is the whole plant phosphorus uptake response to manure. Okay, at senescence or right before harvest. And we can see in this situation that the control, the phosphorus uptake, that was with no fertilizer at all, for pretty low. The fertilizer had pretty good phosphorus uptake, but take a look as you go across, the phosphorus goes up for biennial and annual. So once again, manure is great for phosphorus for potatoes. It's also great for potassium, once again. Okay. The more tons per acre of manure, the higher the uptake of potassium. And here is the yield. The yield stays rather much the same. Okay, you can't tell much. Anything with an A on it is statistically the same. Okay, so all of these are basically, as far as mathematics are concerned, they're all the same. It doesn't matter whether your fertilizer is whether your fertilizer is inorganic or organic. They all yield pretty good. The control just means you didn't fertilize them. Okay. But, and here's the important concept that I taught the growers at potato school, and you guys might as well know it too, because hey, master gardeners are also potato growers, you know. Here's what happens to the specific gravity, and that is a quality factor and can really impact the dollars per pound that the growers get. They can be DQ'd. Their whole lot could be DQ'd if they get too low of a specific gravity, because you can't make good French fries out of them. And that's what you got to have, okay? So the control, the specific gravity is really high. Now fertilizer itself has a little bit of salt to it and can lower the specific gravity somewhat. But remember, if you go back to this previous slide, you've got to weigh those two things together, and we put on fertilizer to get that higher yield. But it does affect specific gravity. But the worst effect of specific gravity, let me be specific here, is when you put on 24 tons per acre every year. And that's clear over there on the right, that's D. D means it's different than anything except for just 16 tons per acre annually. So you could probably get away. Look at that first one, 8 tons per acre every other year. That's the same. That's not any statistically different. They've both got A's on them. So that's the same as fertilizer, using inorganic fertilizer. So I'm not saying you can't use manure, but you've got to use, less than 8 tons per acre and use it every other year. So why does it do that? Well, I think it has a lot to do with salinity and a little bit with the sodicity, which means the amount of sodium and other basic cations that are in the soil. Magnesium was one of the main elements that caused saline conditions in soils, and potatoes are known to be salt sensitive in saline soils. So basically you need to take a year off from manure applications, heavily leach the crop in the fall, and leach out the excess salt. Another one is delayed plant maturity due to too much mineralizable organic nitrogen accumulations. Now, this is the same thing that happens if you over-fertilize with nitrogen. The plant tends to grow a whole bunch of top and not very many spuds. And also, that top keeps growing and never properly senesces and dies off and goes to maturity in the fall as you get ready for harvest. Okay, so that's also a problem with too much manure. So significant amounts of mineralizable nitrogen are a big problem. Plants on manured plots keep taking up nitrogen later in the season. And if you had used inorganic forms of nitrogen, those would have left, dissipated, volatilized, been eaten up by the bugs and bacteria. But that manure is a slow release of nitrogen, clear through the fall. So the potato plant is experiencing a flush of nitrogen throughout the whole year, not just in the spring, and that will delay maturity. Okay, so excessive soil nitrogen supply, delayed tuber maturity. Sometimes you don't even meet industry standards on these things. Okay, so dairy manure applications are effective source of nutrients, especially for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the three main macronutrients. Harvest of of phosphorus-rich potatoes may help to reduce soil phosphorus accumulations on manure fields. And while plant accumulations of nitrogen and potassium from manure applications suppress plant uptake of these other cations that are needed, okay, all nutrients still met sufficiency standards by the University of Idaho. So apply manure every other year and less than 24 tons per acre. And annual manure applications for rates at or above 16 tons per acre, you need to be very, very careful with those. Potatoes mainly, they require about 1 inch of water per week. So if you're using a sprinkler system, put a rain gauge out there and make sure you're getting on at least an inch. Of course, if you get an inch of rain or a quarter of an inch of rain, that is deducted from the amount of water you'll need to put on. But you need to make sure that that supply of water is consistent over the year. You want to bring it up to field capacity and then use up 50% of the moisture. And then bring it back up to field capacity and then let it dry down dry down, okay, to 50% moisture deficit. So you can't take a lot of vacations, and you can't, if you mess up the irrigation early in the spring, you'll pay for it in the end no matter what. You can't really make it up after a while, okay? And erratic watering is what causes those hollow hearts in your spuds, the little center that's open, and it causes growth cracks, knobs, and disformed potatoes. Harvest and storage. Initially, when you take these out, you're going to store them at about 60 to 75 degrees and for 1 to 2 weeks, and that helps you harden the spuds and also allows wound healing. If you cut one a little bit, it doesn't really help with bruising, so be careful with bruising. Don't drop your potatoes more than 12 inches onto a hard surface like cement or something. Now, after the skins have hardened, you can store them at 40 degrees at 90% humidity. And you can store them for quite a while. You don't have to harvest them this way. You can harvest the small spuds, but remember, if you harvest the young little spuds for your potatoes and gravy and stuff, what I like is peas and potatoes, gravy and peas and potatoes with the young potatoes. Well, they don't store very long, and there's no way to make them store because they never got to maturity. But you certainly can. They are edible. You can eat them early, but remember, they won't store. But they have 4 grams of fiber, which people are trying to get more in their diet. And actually, if they're a great source of vitamin C, I've heard that the peel has a lot of vitamins and nutrients in it. And I actually, when I cook my spud in the oven, I always put on a little bit of olive oil and then put on some some salt and stuff. Not just salt, but salt and garlic and things. And oh man, I like eating the peels. They're also a good source of iron and other things like niacin you need. So there's actually a potato nutrition label, and you can see right there, that's the potato. That's the potato without the butter and the salt and pepper and the chives and everything else that you do to it, the bacon and the chili. Okay. There are a lot of diseases: late blight, early blight, white mold, verticillium wilt. And if you'll go to that, Ron redid the publication. There's a potato production in the home garden that you can get online. Ron just redid it, and I'm thinking Lena may have put that on the chat. It's right here, but it will go over some great information on the diseases and things like that. We'll take a quick second just to talk about the main ones here, but common scab is an important one. Remember, these are these little small scabs that are on potato that don't really rub off. Dry conditions enhance scab development and also high organic matter. So once again, adding too much organic matter, especially in the form of steer manure, can cause a problem. But scab is just an appearance problem. You can still eat the spuds. Early blight's a bad one, okay? Late blight's even worse, but we do get early blight around here, and it's that circular brown and black lesions on the leaves, and sometimes they look like they've got a little bullseye type appearance on them. This is the late blight and early blight, the differences between them. So early blight has that, I don't know if you can see that very good on your screens, but it's got that little target type target, and they're more round, and they usually don't go across the veins. Whereas late blight goes right across the veins and is more water soaked and dark and no bullseye in it. And it's the late blight that can really cause damage to crops. So watch your potatoes really closely and make sure you don't get early blight and late blight in them. If you find those, destroy the plant immediately, because once again, you'll be impacting that billion-dollar economy that helps spur the economy and makes it so we can live in the great state of Idaho to some extent. Okay. Pink rot's another one. I don't know if I've got pink rot on here, but maybe I do. That's what late blight looks in the tuber. Whew, tasty. So even if you do get late blight in your garden and try to store some of these spuds that are diseased, they will still rot in storage. Okay. White mold is not one I necessarily wanted to talk about, but we do get it. You'll be able to notice white mold by looking inside the stem, and if you break open the stem, you'll see these little spots that look like mouse droppings. That means that's the sclerotia from the white mold fungus in its overwintering stage, and that's how it overwinters. So you need to be careful of white mold in your crop. There's another picture of it. Now, verticillium wilt. We get a lot of verticillium wilt in our crops. It's probably the most serious disease problem that we have around here that we get quite often. And it is a wilt because it's not due to irrigation or poor irrigation. It's due to it's due to a fungus that gets inside the vascular system of the plant. And it causes the wilting because it plugs up that vascular system. So, proper fertility. And in the spud fields, we have to use fumigation to control that disease.
Reed talked about the breeding programs that are going on right now, and they actually are breeding potato plants that produce lots of those small potatoes. Intentionally, that's what they do. You can harvest them early, but they've got cultivars now that will actually produce a lot of those small potatoes. So they're not looking for the big 8-ounce potatoes. They're looking for these small potatoes, and that's kind of fun. And so kind of keep your ear to the grindstone. There's a lot of changes going on. We used to say, well, yeah, there's a few good cultivars. There's lots of cultivars out there now, and a lot of color variation and things like that. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Reed talked about organic matter in the soil. Now, I grow my potatoes. I actually grow them on top of the ground and cover them with wood chips, and that creates a lot of organic matter. So I do get the scab on my potatoes. It doesn't affect the quality as far as eatability, and it really doesn't even affect the storability of the potatoes. It just, you can't market them very well. And so that's one thing. And then the black scurf, the little black spots on there, that's just another thing. It doesn't affect the quality or the storability. It's just a fungus that kind of gets on the skin. So, those are some things that diseases that have, or even abiotic conditions that we might experience while growing potatoes. But yeah, it's a lot of fun growing the potatoes. And I was going to say something else about storage here. On one of your slides, Reed, I just wanted to point this out. It's when we were talking about the consistent supply of moisture. On your slide, it actually said consistent soppy of moisture.
Well, the problem is I translated that back 2 or 3 times from Spanish to English. Hey, I'm going to blame that on Wayne Jones. That's a slide from Wayne.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's what cutting and pasting will do to you.
If somebody else noticed that soppy actually meant supply. So let's see, what was I going to talk about? Something else here. I guess it kind of went past my brain. So I grow. Yeah, I grow. I do my basically no-till potatoes, but I do get the scabs and things like that on it. So that's kind of a potential issue. There are lots of questions here on. If you want to talk about these, Reed.
Sure, I can, I guess. So it's got how high do you mound up around the potato plant? You don't have to mound them right when you plant them. Of course, you can plant them into mounds, but usually 2 or 3 weeks after they've started coming out of the ground, we'll go ahead and mound up around them. That's to keep any sunlight from hitting the tubers, because the tubers are actually stem material. And you've noticed some tubers turn green, right? That's because they've got the ability to photosynthesize. But that photosynthesis, if they turn green and have that green, they get a little bit more toxic, and the quality goes down dramatically. So we hill the potatoes to keep the sun off them. And the answer is hill them enough to where the spuds are covered.
Yeah.
Usually just a few inches will do fine.
So
Okay.
yeah, but back in the olden days when we used to move pipe, right?
Hmm.
And they would do those. They'd do the early cultivation, and then they'd do a deep hilling later in the season. So they'd actually run past them twice. And
Yeah.
that deep, it was like going up the Grand Canyon and back. You walk in those the pipes across the field, and you'd have to go up and down and up and down. It got pretty messy there when they did that later cultivation. Yeah,
Yeah.
the main thing. One of
Nowadays
the
they
things,
have a tool, a big tool. Well, it's nowadays. It was new when I first started, being an extension educator. But they have what's called a dammer diker that goes through those rows, and they push up. They dig kind of a trench, and then it dams up the trench at the end, and then makes another trench and keeps damming it. And that's so they can hold a lot of moisture, especially in these sandy soils. So
yeah,
the soil structure itself, the soil texture, is also going to play a big part as that healing process goes along.
right.
And then it says, how do we know when to harvest when the potatoes grow underground? Well, it's you learn by doing, but you can always do like the farmers do. So the Stukenholtz guys go out there and they dig up a potato, a whole plant, every week to see what the maturity level is and whether they're at bulking or not. So even the main guys that are out there consulting with the farmers every day, they actually dig up potatoes. So that's what you would kind of have to do, or just get really really good at your garden, know what's happening. But even then, you don't know because it's so different from year to year that the only way to really know what's happening underground is to sacrifice a plant and pull it up. Now, you can be very careful, and I've seen some of the Stukenholtz guys dig a trench next to it and then excavate like they're some kind of a geologist or a opening Tutankhamun's tomb or something, and they'll dig back in and look at the side of the potatoes, and then they'll cover it up, and they don't have to sacrifice a whole potato. But if they're in a hurry, they'll just dig up the whole thing.
Uh,
Um,
One of the things I've noticed, it's kind of a rule of thumb, not set in stone, but potatoes will bloom, and then they'll set those little berries, like a little tiny tomato on there. And when those berries start falling off, that's when I start checking for my small tubers. If I want to have little tiny tubers for my peas and potatoes and carrot soup stuff, that's when I start checking for that. That's when my experience has been that's when they start to form. That is when those little berries fall off them, not when they're flowering, but when the berries fall off them. That's about the time you start seeing those tubers start to develop. Now, how well they develop and everything kind of depends on how you cultivate them and whatnot. But
that fingerlings.
the nice thing about my non uh, cultivation way of growing them is with the wood chips. I can just pull those wood chips away and look at those potatoes. I can see the potato tubers and then push the wood chips back up because the roots are actually below the wood chips into the soil. The tubers are forming on top of the soil because I put the sets on top of the soil, and they don't tend to push up out of the wood chips like they would try to push up out of the soil. Those stolons are they're actually they're stolons and they kind of go along the ground, and then the wood chips they're lighter, and so they kind of stay on top of that instead of that tuber trying to push up to the surface of the soil like it does on the soil. So that's again, it's whether or not you want to grow them that way is fine, but that's the experiences I've had with my no-till potatoes.
One caveat I'd put on that is if you're in a windy area, be careful. I've had a couple of people do that, out in Oakley and stuff, in that area in Burley, and it blew the wood chips away, and then they turned green. And they'll turn green pretty fast. It just takes a couple of days of having the wood chips blow off, and they're
Yeah,
gone.
and that's why I use arborist wood chips.
There was a question on fingerlings. That's a cultivar type. So fingerlings aren't just young potatoes. They're actually long and skinny like your fingers, and they have a definite different taste to them. Some people like them, some people don't. My wife didn't like them that much. The blight in tomatoes and potatoes are different species. Oh, they're answering. Okay, they're answering them.
Yeah, I
He's got him going.
second
Go
that on
ahead.
that
Hey,
one.
Jared, jump in here. Answer some of this stuff.
Well, I just wrote that one in. They are different specific diseases, but because they're potatoes and tomatoes are in the same family, solanaceous, they can the diseases can cross between them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
if
definitely
you
something to be keeping track of. Anything going on with your tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, potatoes.
Well,
I'll
Jared, go over rotation a little bit because I didn't cover that.
Oh well,
I'll cover the I'll put a plug in for the newsletter. Now, Jared, you're going to help us more with the pest alert newsletter that we send out on a weekly basis throughout the growing season. And one of the things I watch for as we do that newsletter is our plant pathologist over in Parma, James Woodall. He has a series of traps set up around the state to determine when the fungal spores are present. And so if the late blight spores are present, they have devices that suck in and trap, and then they can identify, grow those, and determine whether or not the spores are present in an area. And then on top of that, you've got to have the right weather conditions. So this last year, we had the spores present actually quite a bit, but the weather conditions were never quite right for this is late blight, for the late blight disease to develop. But we watch that. I watch that, and if it starts to come up and they say, oh, in eastern Idaho, yeah, we've got some weather conditions, the growing conditions are just right, and the fungal spores are present, then I'll put that in the newsletter. Watch for late blight symptoms uh, in your potatoes and or tomatoes, and then deal with them if they show up. That's when you want to make sure you remove those and get them out of your garden. Early blight, our pathologist in this area, Kasia Duelman, she doesn't get too excited about early blight in home gardens. It's not as big a problem. It can be, but it's typically not as big a problem. We get it almost every year. We want to watch for it and try to do those things that will keep it from developing. So, overhead irrigation, splashing those spores up from the soil. It comes from the soil up. And so you splash those spores up onto the plant, then you'll be more likely. And so overhead irrigation kind of contributes to that. Refuse from previous years that's got the spores there, that will contribute to it. So there are certain things that you can do to try to limit the diseases in that. Okay, somebody else talk.
the rotation thing Reed was talking about. Rotation's hard in the home garden, right? If you have a 20-foot by 20-foot little vegetable plot, moving it from one side to the other side's not. You can do it, but it's not gonna affect it a whole lot. If you do have a larger garden area, then yeah, it can be beneficial to move it from one corner. The next year, kind of put it in quadrants, move your potatoes, since that's what we're talking about, move your potatoes around so they're not growing in the same soil year after year after year.
Yeah. And so usually you want to have at least a 3 year, a year in and at least 2 years out, and then a third year back in. You can do it that way, but 4 years is better than the three. Um, I I do have a story about rotation. When I first started an extension down in Utah, I had a guy call me and says, my garden's not doing well. My potatoes and tomatoes are just doing really poorly, and I can't figure out what's going on. And so I said, well, are you rotating your crops? He says, yeah. And so I went and looked at it, and that's all I had was tomatoes and potatoes. And he's rotating them back and forth. Well, they're kissing cousins. They're spreading the same disease. And so that didn't solve the problem at all. So when you're doing that rotation, keep in mind, if you've got peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, and eggplant, those solanaceous crops, rotating into that same soil is not going to solve the problem. You want to make sure you rotate out of the family. Patio grow bags. Ever do them in We did have at the demonstration garden, and I never heard how that went. It was Gary or somebody, Jennifer Austin. Did they ever figure out that box that they did for the potatoes? Did that do very well?
The potatoes did great. They grew really well, but I'm not exactly sure. I didn't see the final growth of the potatoes.
Okay. Yeah, what they did was they had a grow box and they put soil in there and they had the potatoes growing, and then they kind of built the sides up, and it was made out of wood, so it wasn't going to be quite so hot on the roots. And they put some more soil in. I never did hear how the little trial went. That was kind of an exciting thing to see, though. Same kind of concept though, as those grow bags. Yes, keep in mind whenever you do grow bags or pots, patio pots, things like that, you have a total different root system. You don't have them spreading out like they do in your garden. Your roots will spread out. When you have them contained like that, it's going to be a little bit, and so you have your cultivation practices have to be a little bit different. You have to keep that moist and perhaps even shading the grow bags, because they're black and they'll get hot, and that can cause some problems as well. So anybody wants the green? No, the green does not go away. Once they become green, they are green. You can peel down past the green, but if they get green, you can't put them in the dark and have them become not green. Compost made from kitchen. Compost is compost, and so it's not going to hurt unless, again, if we get the organic matter too high. That's the problem I have with the way I grow it. Is the organic matter is really rich in that top 2 or 3 inches of soil with all the wood chips, and I get a lot of wind too. But the arborist wood chips do stay in place. I've never had them blow in the wind. But anyway, organic matter, compost. It's not gonna if it's properly composted, then that's one thing. If it's just kitchen scraps, I would compost them first before I put them in the garden. Cloth grow bags do not work for me this last year. Hard to keep water. Yeah, it's kind of what I was mentioning there. Your root system is totally different, so the grow bags not necessarily a good option unless you can keep them watered well. That's the challenge. Yeah, harvesting would definitely be an easier reason for doing it. A lot easier. Ones use demographics were impossible to keep moist. Yeah, the grow bags. Yeah. Corrugated boxes produce better than any other method at our place. Tried everything. So, that it's a matter of it's a stem, and so what you're trying to do is get as much of that stem covered, and so you put them in and you add soil to the top of it and things like that. I have had good yields out of my potatoes and get some good sized potatoes, and have some small potatoes that I harvest, and so it's all good, all fun. Jared, do you want to answer that one?
Which one? The petunias? Yeah, no, I'm not aware of petunias. And even the marigold one, yeah, it can prevent, it can kind of be a repellent for some insects, but I've never seen it really have a significant impact. I mean, you'd have to put a lot of them in there to even start to have any kind of impact on that.
I'm trying to think of how closely related the petunias are to the potatoes.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I mean, the flower is totally different, so it's not a solanaceous crop necessarily. But let's see. The one thing, marigolds are attracted to slugs, and so they can be a trap crop for slugs. If you want to do that, and you trap them, and then you pick them or destroy them, however you want to do with the slugs. But otherwise, like the straw flowers, if you've got some plants that are bringing in the predators and having lots of flowering plants, that helps a lot, because you got the predators come in, and the adult predators typically will like to feed on the pollen. That's why they like that open flowers and things like that. Then they'll lay their eggs in the colonies of the other bugs and try to keep them down that way. So that really is a good way to help keep the predators close. It's like, gotta have food or your teenage boys don't stick around to do their chores.
alyssum and thyme. I've noticed a lot of hoverflies on those
Yeah.
in the past. They're a beneficial one. But yeah, as far as just a repellent, though, not so much. But yeah, for bringing in as a food source for your beneficials, that's a little different.
So as Lena's typing this one up here, the Veronica, a perennial. So you can have a perennial flower bed out by your garden and have them come up and have that be part of that attraction for those predators to help with some of get those bugs out there helping you with your work. And so, have a perennial bed out there. That's fine. You may not be growing vegetables in there, but you're attracting those good bugs. So yeah, and then tillage, not having too much tillage. Of course, potatoes are a crop typically that disturbs the soil. The way we cultivate them, the way you have to hill them up, at least keep them covered. And that's one of the reasons why I started growing mine on top with the wood chips, and there are issues with that. But the less you can disturb the soil, the more of these beneficial ground insects like the mud daubers and your ground beetles, lots of different ground beetles that do a lot of good in your soil. That those things like that undisturbed soil. Again, your perennial flower bed can be a place for those kinds of things to do well. Ron won't agree. Calendula. I do have calendula actually out in my garden. But it is a weed. If you let it get away, it gets away. But it's really not too hard to control. I mean, it's a plant that's easy to pick to kind of weed out. But yeah, calendula can get weedy. It's a beautiful plant. I like calendula. Just preen. Okay. Let's see.
So on this rock question, what do you mean by having some rocks? Just interfering with your...
I think for like the mud daubers and stuff is what she's thinking.
Oh.
Mine live in sand with large river rocks in it. They don't seem bothered.
Yeah, they like sandier soil. They seem to like that. So one year, my wife and I were out harvesting the potatoes, and she picked this. She was picking them. I was digging them up, and she was picking them. She put them in, and I said, "That is not a potato." She looked at it. It looked a lot like a potato, but it was a red rock. It looked like a red potato. We were picking red potatoes, and she just put it in there. And so she started collecting these rocks and painting the potato eyes on them. We have these potatoes, the petrified potatoes around our yard. So yeah, rocks are fine. You don't get any soil texture or anything like that out of them as long as they're not too big. I don't like to have big rocks, and I've got several piles of big rocks, and when I say piles, I mean like 10 feet long and 3 feet high, 5 feet wide kind of piles from pulling rocks out of my garden. And so I pull out the bigger rocks. Smaller rocks I don't get too excited about. As I go through, I might pull them out, but you don't get any nutrient holding capacity or water holding capacity or anything like that out of the rocks. And so if you can have fewer rocks and more good textured soil, then you'll be better off. Same thing. Again, the roots will grow around the rocks. It's not that big of a deal. And then the big rocks, and I had big river rocks, and they would get caught in the when I used to till, they get caught in the tiller and jam things up and things like that. But if it makes it hard for you to get your planting rows and things like that because you're always hitting these rocks and it's bumping you out of the way, that may be work at getting some of the big stuff out. But here in Jefferson County, that's not much choices. We got rocks.
You do get a little bit of a microclimate from the rocks warming up and retaining that heat during the night. So there is one little silver lining to that compared to other soils.
It's interesting to see roots grow, and in this you get some fun carrots. It's interesting to see roots grow around these rocks. Back when my last place I lived in Utah before I finally made it back to Idaho, we had a sycamore tree in my backyard, a couple big sycamore trees, and they had gotten underneath the house, underneath the basement, and they pretty much destroyed the Orangeburg plumbing pipe. And so I had to go in and there are these roots and lots of rocks, and you'd see these caves and things like that where the roots had just kind of formed around the rocks and things. It was kind of cool to see that look shape of those rocks in those roots. So yeah, the roots will grow around them. They'll be all right. Okay. Any other questions? We're getting close to 8 o'clock.
We exhausted the questions.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we haven't started gardening yet. Oh, here's one thing, Jared. Do you want to talk a little bit about your article, or what you found out with your art? That'll be a good thing.
Temperature. Yeah, I just sent it to Lena earlier today to go out to the pest alert. Is that what you're gonna put it in, Lena?
Well, we don't start the pest alert for a little while, but yeah, I was going to kind of pretty it up like our template and send it out to that list. Yeah, right. I think it's good information for right now.
So I've been looking at the 5 warmest. I just picked 5 just because I can't look at everything. The 5 warmest winters on record here in East Idaho, and we're definitely on track to. And by that time frame, I mean 1st of December to the end of February. We're definitely on track to be the warmest on record for this year. The nutshell for take-home message is that we have plants that are waking up. South side of your house, they're definitely starting to wake up. Pocatello is a little bit warmer. American Falls, Idaho Falls is a little bit warmer than Rexburg and points north. But we've basically met the chilling requirements needed for especially our fruit trees to be, they need a certain period of dormancy for them to then go ahead and wake up. So they are ready to wake up as soon as we get some just a little bit warmer temperatures and a series, a week or 2 of temperatures above 50, which we've started to have here and there. So this would be a bad year for apricots, especially. They like to come out early. So the last frost in the spring did not move even when we have warm winters. So the average last frost for your date is still going to be the average last frost, even though we're very warm for this winter.
So the take-home message is, even though it's a warm winter, you really don't need to go out and start gardening. Don't start gardening right now.
I have some sprinkler things I need to fix like that. Yeah, I will start.
Oh, yeah, you can get some of that.
But as far as planting, get some frost blanket now. Keep it handy.
Yeah. So even if you get things planted early, be prepared to protect them.
Get your pruning done right now.
Yes. I'm normally I'd be fine right now, but I'm behind the ball now because of how warm it is.
It'll probably get really cold now.
Yeah,
I'd be fine if we get some cold again here.
I get a little bit concerned, and I don't know. Bracken Henderson was one who mentioned this a while back, but a couple of years ago, he said pruning. He was talking about pruning peaches. Pruning peaches early can bring them out of dormancy. I don't know that it necessarily brings them out of dormancy, but if they're coming out of dormancy, I could see that they may kind of get shocked into breaking bud a little bit quicker, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So I don't, even with my pruning.
Yeah, I'm not
dormancy. I'm not getting too excited yet.
What you could do is, and the effect of this is maybe somewhat limited, but if you have access to a lot of wood chips and pile the wood chips, 4 or 6 inches deep to keep the soil temperature low. So you're trying to insulate the cold soil and keep it cold and keep the sunlight warm, the warmth off of it. That will help delay things. Putting the other problem with it warming up is when that sap starts flowing, it's just gonna start flowing early. That's what we got this year. And then when we get some really cold temperatures, we can get cracking on that trunk when that sap freezes. Putting a white latex paint, 50% paint, 50% water, should help reflect the light off of that trunk and delay that a little bit. So that's why you see white trunks in orchards, especially young trees with really thin bark. That's why you see that sometimes.
The question on maples, use prune maples in the spring, they bleed, and that's okay. It's not a big issue. They do. If you actually want to prune them when they have less bleeding, you would prune them later, actually in early summer instead of during the springtime. So I wouldn't get too worried. If you want to prune the maples, just accept that you're going to have sap running on them. That's just the way they are. Although bracken does that sap collection, maple syrup stuff. And he was saying the other day that he's not sure it's getting cold enough at night for us to get a good maple sap collection. I don't know. I probably should go out and tap a tree or two, but anyway. Okay. Well, it's 8:02. It's after 8 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our first Idaho Home Garden Tips, and we will be back in 2 weeks. How do you get arborist wood chips? Couple of different ways. Go talk to any of these tree pruners and see if they want to drop them off at your place if you see them close by. The other chip drop is another option. I don't know what Chip Buddy is, but chip drop is you get with them, and some of these arborists.
It's like chip drop.
Yeah, there are these companies that kind of keep tabs on arborists, and the arborist will sign up and say, hey, if you've got anybody, and so they don't have to track it, they just call chip drop and say, we want to have places and be able to drop chips off instead of paying to take them to the landfill. We can take them to these other places, and a lot of times if you offer to pay $20 for a load, they'll be more likely to come to your place. But chip drop, Chip Buddy, those kinds of places or talk to the arborist companies if you have a link with them. I did have one guy say, yeah, I'll drop it off for $100. What? Yeah, everybody wants them. Okay, that's where you're going to be. I'm not going to pay $100 for a load of good chips. Anyway. Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.